In today's video, we have a variety of NHL topics to discuss, including the future of NHL coach Mike Babcock, recently let go from the Maple Leafs. Where might he land next? I want to take a look at some trade rumors involving the Nashville Predators and Buffalo Sabres. Plus, could the Montreal Canadiens get in on the Taylor Hall sweepstakes should the Devils go down the road of a trade? We'll discuss all that scenarios coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of topics here today, and I want to start off with Mike Babcock, former head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and where might he land next? Obviously, a coach of his stature does not become available very often in the NHL, and there's bound to be a variety of teams that are going to be interested in possibly bringing him on board now that he's no longer with the Maple Leafs. Of course, he's under contract still for 3.5 years, making a lot of money, over $6 million per year. So clearly, from a financial standpoint, he's made tons of money. He doesn't need to work, but I would imagine a guy like Babcock and with his legacy that he's going to want to come back somewheres and eventually end on a more winning note, more successful note than he did with Toronto. It's the first time he's ever been fired from an NHL coaching job. He previously had coached with Anaheim and Detroit, but left on his own terms. So this is something new for him. I mean, he went to Toronto with a lot of a big name, a lot of promise, a lot of potential. He really did do a lot of good early on with the Maple Leafs, but in my opinion, kind of failed to evolve and adapt to what that team had become, and therefore wasn't the right guy to be in charge to lead them to more future success in the playoffs and potential Stanley Cup at some point with all that young talent that they have there in their organization. Obviously, there's a number of teams though that are likely going to be looking for a new head coach sometime soon, and I'm sure a lot of these teams are having discussions much more sooner than they might have anticipated with a big name like him being available. I'm looking at teams like the New Jersey Devils, when John Hines could be in trouble. They've greatly underperformed this year. You get teams like Minnesota. Obviously, Bruce Boudreau is on the last year of his contract. They're a struggling team. A new GM in town. Likely not going to be back as head coach next year. I do believe he has another year on his contract, which is supposed to be in some sort of a consulting role. So he very well could remain with the Wild in some capacity, but I highly doubt he'll be behind the bench unless he finds other opportunities to coach elsewhere. Hard to say. He's also another very successful long-time NHL coach. You get other teams like the San Jose Sharks, who certainly have not come out this season so far and had the success they were hoping for. I do think that scenario is a little bit less likely, though. GM Doug Wilson doesn't typically like to make coaching changes during the season, and I do think that if anything, they will shake things up with some trades or other acquisitions before Peter DeBoer will be out of work, but you just never know. Any kind of teams that are underperforming are certainly the main candidates to take a look at here. And you can't completely rule out a possibility of returning to Detroit as well. I mean, obviously that's where he was for a long time. They were in a whole different scenario. They were just kind of beginning a rebuild when he left to go to the Leafs. Of course, since then, Ken Holland has left. A new coach, Jeff Blashill's been there for quite some time now, who took over from Babcock after he left. And really, there's a lot of speculation whether or not he'll be back because he's on an expiring deal as well. Of course, Steve Yzerman's now the GM. Things could be different there. Maybe he'd want to bring Babcock back. Just as food for thought, some speculation on my part. I really have no way to say that they'd be interested, but certainly another team who very well could be in the market for a new coach sooner than later. And the other team you can't completely rule out of all this as well, likely won't want to hire a head coach for a little bit of time, would be the new franchise in Seattle. I mean, they have a new GM now in Ron Francis. We should have a team name sometime here soon, hopefully early in the New Year's, but it's been reported here probably sometime early in January. Maybe around the time of the Winter Classic or the All-Star Game would be the time that I would expect an announcement. The last we had heard from Seattle was that they're getting really close to kind of finalizing a name, but of course the marketing side of things would have to be worked on to make sure they had enough materials and jersey and logos, everything developed before they'd make an announcement and release anything for everybody to see. So they're going to be looking for a coach, and obviously they're going to want to start off with a lot of success like we saw in Vegas. So bringing in a big name like Babcock certainly could be an option for them as well. But we also don't even know right now, does Mike Babcock want to continue to coach? I would suspect he probably does. And I know even though his tenure in Toronto did not end all that gracefully, did not end with the success he was looking for. He's got over 700 career wins as an NHL coach. That is not a fluke. I do think after having some time to reflect and look upon how everything went in Toronto, that I do think he can make some adaptations and kind of get back to being a very successful NHL coach with another opportunity. He's bound to come. So what are your thoughts on Mike Babcock, former head coach now of the Toronto Maple Leafs? Where is the most likely landing spot for him to get his next coaching gig in the NHL? Mention as well well, I want to take a look at a couple NHL trade rumors floating around the NHL rumor mill, including the Buffalo Sabres, a team that we've talked about here a number of times. There's more reports, more fuel to the fire here, indicating that GM Jason Botterill is really pushing hard to find a scorer to add to the Sabres roster. Again, for the second year in a row, they had a good start and have really faltered as of late. Ever since their trip overseas, they really have not gone well ever since, and things are spiraling quickly downhill, and I do think they need to add some more offense and more secondary scoring, or somebody who can play a top six role ideally, which is not an easy task to add, but there's no secret that Botterill's been pushing hard. I just don't think a lot of the players he's trying to use as trade chips have a lot of value and attractiveness to other NHL teams. The other big issue here too is a lot of teams are up against the cap. There's a lot of difficulty in making trades right now. There's several teams using long-term injury reserve cap relief to be cap compliant, and making moves is tricky. So depending on who he's looking at for players and who might be available, it's certainly no easy task. But the Buffalo Sabres are still a team. There's more reports all the time about what Botterill's trying to do, and I do think at some point here, hopefully they figure out a way to get themselves another forward. They have a plethora of defensemen they can use as trade bait, and at some point here, it's bound to break and something will happen for them. But keep an eye on the Sabres. They are looking to make a move to make sure they get back on track to hopefully having a good shot at the playoffs. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to talk about the Nashville Predators. Now, the Preds are another surprising team as well. They started off pretty well, but have been kind of hot and cold ever since, and really at this point have about a .500 record, and they're certainly not in a position where they're in a top 3 spot in their division. Playoffs are not a given for them at this point. This is the time of year as well that we typically don't see a ton of change in the NHL standings. Most NHL teams at this point forward typically make the playoffs. I know most of you will probably reference the St. Louis Blues and what happened last year, so there's always those exceptions for sure. But that's not the norm. That's not something you see very often. Could we see it again? Absolutely. But a player to keep your eye on in Nashville, who very well is somebody that David Poile would like to be moved, would be Kyle Turris. He's had a bit of a hot and cold season. He's been a healthy scratch in the past. Did get an opportunity to play, so he did play up in the lineup a little bit more. Certainly put up some points. Things were going better. But then things cooled off again. He's been a healthy scratch here in the last few games again. So Kyle Turris is a player that Poile has tried to move before. Things have not really worked out there. And with the addition of Matt Duchene through free agency this past summer, along with guys like Johansson and Benino, certainly makes a guy like Turris expendable at this point. He's making a lot of money to be playing a bottom 6 role, but as long as he's continuing to struggle, it's going to be something that's difficult for them to actually make happen. So I guess we'll see what happens here with Nashville and Kyle Turris. But again, the trade talks have heated up. The rumors are still flying around that he's a player that Poile would like to move and try to bring back something else to help the team to get back on track and get into the playoffs. So we'll see what happens here. But if any other team is looking for a solid number 2, maybe even number 3 center iceman, he certainly fits the bill. And there's plenty of teams out there, I think, where he'd be a good fit. Now, lastly here, I want to take a look at the Taylor Hall sweepstakes. As we know, the Devils are not doing well, and the odds of him being traded, according to NHL insider Elliot Friedman, are very, very high. Darren Ferris, his agent, has a reputation for not doing contracts in season, and he certainly encourages his clients to wait as long as possible to sign a contract so that they can get what they consider to be fair market value and to get the most they can on their new contract. So Friedman considers the odds of a contract getting done extremely slim. So given all that, he feels that the likelihood of Hall being traded are really, really high. Now, we've discussed a few different scenarios of where he could end up if they go down that road, but Friedman's also mentioned here recently that he feels that the Montreal Canadiens could be a team to watch for, making a major acquisition to kind of go all in to make a deeper playoff run this year. And given the fact of what they have for assets, including draft picks and prospects, certainly makes sense that it very well could be a potential that they could realize. Eric Engels of Sportsnet kind of piggybacked on the fact of what Friedman's had to say, kind of put it on an article for Sportsnet.ca, outlining the possibility of Taylor Hall becoming a Montreal Canadien. Now, personally, I don't think it matters who acquires him if he is traded. I'm not sure that they're going to get a contract done, so he'd likely go as a rental, and then he would explore free agency in the summertime. So I think that very well could push his price down a little bit, but it's still a player like Hall's magnitude. It's not going to come cheap, and GM Ray Sherrill certainly would take his time to see what he could do to get as best a deal as possible, of course. But Montreal has a ton of draft picks, including 12 picks for the 2019 draft. So they have all of that on their side. They have numerous prospects, many that are either playing in the American Hockey League, some that are getting some NHL time now, plus many that are still playing overseas as well. They've really drafted well and accumulated a lot of picks in recent years. So they do have So they are very, very well positioned in a sense that they'd have a lot of attractive assets that New Jersey would covet in a trade for Hall, and they have some young players on their roster as well that they very well might find interesting too. So I do think it's a possibility that they would have everything it takes to make the acquisition, and certainly from Eric Engel's perspective at Sportsnet, it certainly makes sense that if Friedman's right and that the Habs are going to go big game hunting, that Taylor Hall would be a player that they would zone in on and see if they could pry him out of New Jersey. I do think with everything going on, though, in the Atlantic Division, there's been a few surprises this year. We do not expect to have the Leafs and the Lightning, out of the top three. We expected the Panthers to be better. They have been, but, still a little bit inconsistency early on there. Boston's been really solid. They're so far they're the class of the division. And then, of course, you got Montreal in there as well. Ottawa's even done really well as of late. I mean, that may be difficult for them to sustain. They may fall back. Buffalo had a hot start, and now they're falling back a bit. So it's certainly things are going to heat up, but at the same time, the Habs could be looking to take advantage of the fact that Toronto and Tampa have not lived up to expectations, and maybe see if they can get themselves secured in a top 3 spot and see if they can make a playoff run. Like we've seen last year, if you can get in the playoffs, anything can happen. And adding a player like Taylor Hall's magnitude would certainly go a long way to making him a much more offensive force. So let me know what your thoughts are, especially if you're a Habs fan. If the Habs were able to make an acquisition like Taylor Hall, and if Elliot Friedman is right that they're likely in the market for a big acquisition before the playoffs, what would your thoughts be on a potential Taylor Hall acquisition, and what would you be willing to part with to make it happen? If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.